throughout his administration. Both the constitutional violations of the ethical conflicts of interest came to pass in strikingly swift, vivid, and nefarious ways. Donald Trump's refusal to divest from his business upon entering office and resulting foreign conflicts. President Trump entered office with two primary sets of business assets particularly susceptible to foreign influence: his domestic business holdings, including hotels and real estate, which were positioned to reap revenues from foreign government or state-linked customers, and his business holdings abroad, which were also positioned to reap revenues while being directly subject to the regulation and oversight of foreign governments. As one federal appellate judge explained in one of these cases brought against former President Trump under the Emoluments Clause arising out of precisely this conflict, governments and their diplomats perceive it as crucial to their success in diplomacy with the United States to secure the personal goodwill of the president and avoid the risk of incurring his displeasure. The president's favor is a lucrative prize for a foreign diplomat whose visits to our country often have the purpose of seeking some favorable action from the government which the president largely controls. In addition, the president, according to the allegations of the complaint, has announced to the world his favoritism for nations that patronize his businesses. It follows, with undeniable logic, that the envoys of foreign nations who are free to choose equivalent venues will be strongly motivated to choose the president's establishments so as to advance their objective of currying the president's favor and to avoid the risk of displeasing him by choosing his competitors. This concern was borne out shortly after Mr. Trump's election in 2016, when approximately 100 foreign diplomats from a range of foreign governments gathered at a promotional event for the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C. As the Washington Post reported, "Believe me, all the delegations will go there," said one Middle Eastern diplomat who recently toured the hotel and booked an overseas visitor. The diplomat said many stayed away from the hotel before the election for fear of a Clinton backlash, but now it's the place to be seen. In interviews with a dozen diplomats, many of whom declined to be named because they were not authorized to speak about anything related to the next U.S. president, some said spending money at Trump's hotel is an easy, friendly gesture to the new president. Why wouldn't I stay at his hotel blocks from the White House so I can tell the new president, I love your hotel? Isn't it rude to come to his city and say, I am staying at your competitor? Said one Asian diplomat. Guests at the Trump Hotel have begun parking themselves in the lobby, ordering expensive cocktails, hoping to see one of the Trump family members or the latest cabinet pick. One foreign official hoped Trump, famous for the personal interest he takes in his businesses, might check the guest logs himself. Between Mr. Trump's election and his assumption of office, both Republican and Democratic ethics experts urged Donald Trump to divest from his business holdings and place them in an independent blind trust to avoid the appearance of divided loyalties. One letter, signed by 29 such experts, issued a blunt warning. As long as you continue to maintain ownership of the Trump Organization, no other steps that you take will prevent the serious conflicts of interest, appearance of conflicts, and emoluments clause problems that will exist throughout your presidency. In these circumstances, you cannot separate the presidency from your business enterprises. Donald Trump cavalierly ignored this warning. Instead, before entering office, Mr. Trump transferred nearly all of his business holdings, including the 4 properties discussed in this report, into the Donald J. Trump Revocable Trust. This trust, however, was anything but independent. It was controlled by 2 trustees, Donald Trump Jr. and Trump Organization Chief Financial Officer Alan Weisselberg. Although this structure created the illusion of separation between Mr. Trump and his business interests, in reality, President Trump retained effective control over and the complete financial benefit of his businesses. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a moment to keep reading White House for Sale. This is Facepalm America. I'm Beowulf Rockland. Facepalm America, I'm Beowulf Rockland. Let's continue reading White House for Sale, How Princes, Prime Ministers, and Premiers Paid Off President Trump. By its own terms, the purpose of the trust is to hold assets for the benefit of Donald J. Trump. Mr. Trump Jr. and Mr. Weisselberg managed the trust accordingly and could distribute net income or principal to Donald J. Trump at his request. President Trump was able to quietly draw down any money from his trust whenever he wanted, as well as receive reports on any profit or loss on his business. For example, in 2019, the committee obtained documents and testimony showing evidence that both President Trump and the Donald J. Trump Revocable Trust reimbursed Mr. Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, for illegal campaign contributions. This information formed the core of the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's April 2023 indictment of former President Donald Trump in the Supreme Court of New York State. Also in 2019, Mr. Cohen testified before the Oversight Committee that Mr. Trump elevated the value of his assets in statements to banks and insurers in order to obtain more advantageous terms for loans and insurance coverage, and in addition, that Mr. Trump provided deflated valuations to lower real estate taxes on certain assets. Mr. Cohen's testimony led the New York State Attorney General to open an investigation of Mr. Trump and the Trump Organization that same year, and later bring the lawsuit in which Mr. Trump was found to have defrauded banks and insurers by providing these false statements. Claimed donation of profits by the Trump Organization to the U.S. Treasury did not avoid Trump's myriad violations of the Foreign Emoluments Clause. Several months into President Trump's term, the Trump Organization issued a pamphlet describing its voluntary directive to donate all profits from foreign governments' patronage at our hotels and similar businesses during President Trump's presidential term to the U.S. Treasury. This policy, however, clearly failed to comply with the Constitution, which imposes a total ban on the receipt of any revenue from foreign governments, not just profits, absent congressional approval. Because it was limited to profits and did not extend to revenues generally, this policy was insufficient on its face to comply with the Foreign Emoluments Clause. The standard legal dictionary definition of emolument, as well as rulings by federal courts that have addressed the issue, make clear that an emolument includes any benefit, gain, or advantage. As one of these courts observed, this definition essentially covers anything of value. By its own terms, the Trump Organization's claimed donation of profits to Treasury, therefore, still allowed former President Trump to retain significant emoluments in the form of revenues, which its policy excluded from the funds designated for donation. Moreover, the policy substantially limited the scope of profits it covered to those, 1, generated from foreign governments' patronage from wholly owned properties, and 2, generated from management fees earned from managed hotels and condominium hotels attributed to foreign governments' patronage. By excluding non-wholly owned and non-hotel Trump properties, the policy omitted potentially significant sums from the already truncated category of emoluments that it covered. For example, this report identifies more than $1 million in foreign emoluments paid to Trump World Tower in New York, which fall outside the scope of the Trump Organization's policy. The policy further reserved the right of the Trump Organization to exclude from its calculation of profit state-owned and state-controlled entities in industries such as aerospace, defense, banking, finance, healthcare, energy, and others which may not be reasonably identifiable as foreign government entities. Finally, the policy expressly stated that the Trump Organization would not even attempt to identify all emoluments, claiming that complying with this constitutional requirement would be impractical, and that a policy that requires all guests to identify themselves would impede upon personal privacy and diminish the guest experience of our brand. As such, under the Trump Organization's policy, the only profits reported were those volunteered by foreign governments, and Trump-owned businesses never opened their books to allow review of their treatment of these payments. It is hard to imagine a more ludicrous and half-hearted approach to the categorical prohibition in the Constitution. The significant benefit to former President Trump from revenues generally, regardless of any profits, is demonstrated by the precarious financial condition of the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C. during his presidency. As committee Democrats have previously reported, a review of financial documents regarding the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C., provided by the General Services Administration, GSA, revealed that while President Trump claimed on required financial disclosures that he made $156 million in employment income from the hotel between 2016 and 2020, the hotel in fact lost more than $73 million during this period. Reflecting the serious financial problems at the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C., annual financial statements obtained by the committee also reveal that one of President Trump's holding companies, DJT Holdings LLC, injected tens of millions of dollars into the Trump International Hotel as loans, the vast majority of which were never repaid and were later converted to capital contributions. The hotel's significant losses were due in part to the hotel's fixed costs, including general and administrative expenses, sales and marketing expenses, and property operations and maintenance. Given that the hotel was operating at a significant loss, foreign government revenue would have helped to cover a portion of these fixed costs, even if alleged profits were donated. Under the Trump administration, federal agencies acquiesced to President Trump's receipt of unconstitutional foreign emoluments. In contravention of the Constitution's explicit prohibition on a president's receipt of foreign emoluments, federal agencies under the Trump administration repeatedly acquiesced to former President Trump's desire to continue profiting from his business while in office. One notable instance involved the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C., which is located in the old Post Office Pavilion, an historic building that has a lease overseen by the federal GSA. The contract for the lease included a provision specifying no elected official of the government of the United States shall be admitted to any share or part of this lease, or to any benefit that may arise therefrom. Despite the clear language of this provision, the agency released a statement in March 2017 explaining that the agency had found that then-President Trump was in full compliance with the lease because his trust was a party to the lease rather than to him personally. Some within GSA, however, were concerned that this position violated the Foreign Emoluments Clause, the Domestic Emoluments Clause, and the plain terms of the lease prohibiting elected officials from being leaseholders. These concerns were merited, and the GSA Inspector General later determined that GSA's decision-making process regarding this matter included serious shortcomings. According to GSA's Inspector General, GSA's lawyers understood that President Trump's continued interest in the Trump International Hotel was a possible violation of the Foreign Emoluments Clause, but nevertheless simply decided to punt and not to address the issue. As the Inspector General's report succinctly stated, GSA ignored the Constitution. Similarly, in 2017, the Department of State approved leases by foreign governments at Trump World Tower in New York, thereby creating a situation in which an agency overseen by the president directly sanctioned unconstitutional emoluments flowing to the president. It is unclear to what extent the State Department considered the Constitution before approving these leases.